Ken Stomsky along with Harry Rock for yet another episode of Discover Westfield.
Kenny, it's great to be back with you again. I'm excited about this visit that we're going to be taking in today.
And this is a big visit because it is our season finale, not series finale, but season finale.
I know, it's hard to believe that this is episode number 6 for us.
Yes, we're going to take part of the winter off and get back into it. But for people new to the show, what exactly is Discover Westfield?
So Discover Westfield, this was Kenny Stomsky's idea a while ago, quite frankly. I think they were coming back from a drive from going to see one of the rockets launches down south. And the whole idea is to be able to bring our cameras into your place of business so that we can help you promote what you have to offer to the clientele, to the customer base of the greater Westfield area. We recognize that COVID has had a tremendous impact on a lot of businesses. We want to hear your stories of how much it's impacted you, how you've adapted, but most importantly, the fact that you're doing well. We want to help promote you and let people know that you are a viable place, still open, and that you've got great wares to sell and offer them.
Great description. Where are we heading out to?
So today we're going to the Westfield News, which is actually part of the Reminder Publishing West offices. They have moved. Most of you will always recall that they were located on School Street, and for me it seems like been there forever. I think it was the mid-1960s that they started there. And they just recently, in just a matter of months, have moved up to 181 Root Road, which is part of the Roots Athletics Center. And most of you will know that big gray building that has the outdoor soccer fields next to it. That's where they are. You'll see their sign on the front of the building there in the lower level. And when you go in, you'll be really impressed with the professional offices that they have, all the cubicles where all the reporters are operating from and the photographers. And that's where you can find your subscriptions. You can buy copies of the paper and also talk about potential stories or anything else that you need relative to the newspaper.
This sounds exciting. Are you ready to jump over there?
I am ready. Here we go.
Let's go.
Welcome to Discover Westfield with Ken and Harry. I'm Harry Rock, and I'm joined with my partner and co-host, Kenny Stomsky. He's the man behind the camera, so you won't see him, but you might hear him periodically. This is a special production brought to you by WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15. Today we're visiting the Reminder Publishing West offices, which includes the Westfield News. And we are located at the Roots Athletics Center on the lower level at 181 Root Road here in Westfield. And I'm thrilled today to introduce my two guests. We have Mike Dobbs, who is G. Michael Dobbs. People know him as Mike Dobbs, but in the paper you'll see his byline as G. Michael Dobbs. He is the managing editor of the Reminder, including the Penny Saver and many other notable newspapers, really 6 weekly newspapers, a daily newspaper, and 2 magazines. We're going to get into that in more detail in just a minute. And also with us is Hope Tremblay, who many of you will know, a Westfield face that's very familiar to any of you that work with the Westfield News with articles and stories and just seeing her around town. She is the editor of the Westfield News. So I'm thrilled to be here. Kenny and I are on the road, going around visiting different businesses and just trying to give our community an opportunity to meet the faces and kind of get the inside story of what's happening in Westfield with our local business community. And also we'll talk a little bit about how the COVID epidemic has changed things for you. But before we get started, we always find that our viewers love learning a little bit about the people that we're interviewing. So, Mike, I'll start with you. Where'd you grow up?
You asked a difficult question first. My father was career Air Force. So let's see, was it my first 6 years of school? I went to 7 different schools. However,
wow.
To use the parlance of the day, I identify as Springfield is a hometown.
Okay.
Springfield's my hometown.
Okay.
Even though technically, by definition, it's not. But yes.
Actually, so how long have you actually lived in Springfield or in the Springfield area?
Well, most of my life. But in Springfield, we've been in our house 30 years. There was 10 years before that. So about 40 years in Springfield.
Fantastic. And Hope, how about you?
I call Westfield my hometown. I was born in New York and lived there the first few years of my life, but I've been a Westfielder since halfway through kindergarten.
Since halfway through
I
kindergarten.
moved here in my middle of kindergarten, and I started at Juniper Park, and then I went to St. Mary's the next 12 years. So
Oh, you did?
I did.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's really interesting. That's great. And you currently live in Westfield?
I do.
Right.
I do.
Yeah, that's
Westfield,
awesome.
Southwick, those are my hometowns.
Yep. Well, can't think of a better place to live. And
Exactly.
Mike, I too, I've lived in Westfield almost 30 years now, so love it here in the Valley and never planning on leaving, that's for sure, between my wife and I. So I'm just curious as to how you got started in the news business. What attracted you to this industry and business?
I was born a masochist. I've always, as a kid, I loved writing. That sort of solidified in high school. And I just enjoy the idea of being able to learn something and sharing it with someone. And that's what reporters do. We learn things. Reporters get to be professionally ignorant. You know, you get to go into a room and ask questions and then learn about something. From high school on, I've been involved in either newspapers or radio. Or I had a short stint as doing some PR work, but I came back to the One True Faith, and it's been in my blood for almost my entire life.
So you were part of your high school newspaper, or?
Oh yeah, I edited the high school newspaper. I did an amateur magazine on the side. When I went to UMass, I did not work at the Collegian. Instead, I worked at the Valley Advocate, where they paid you money. So I liked the concept of writing something and getting money for
got
it.
paid.
So, and I did work at the Westfield News. I was the lifestyles page editor. That was 1979.
Wow.
Gene Casey was the editor of the paper. E. Carol Mazza was the publisher, and I was there for a year before I went on to the Transcript Telegram in Holyoke. So yeah.
Wow. How old were you when you first started writing articles professionally and actually getting paid for it?
Well, the paid part would be 1975. I was a junior at UMass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been doing this a while.
Yeah, you have. And Hope, what about you?
If you go back to my high school yearbook, you'll see something about where I said I wanted to write for Rolling Stone magazine. I wanted to combine my love of music and arts and writing. And when I went to college, I leaned more toward arts. And then I had an amazing English professor, Alan Feldman, and I had a fabulous journalism professor. And they just rekindled my love for writing, and so I graduated with a minor in art, so I didn't lose that completely.
Okay.
But I too started working for a local paper while I was still in college. I was a stringer for the former Middlesex Daily News and the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, and did that for a while, and I found myself back at my hometown paper, the Westfield Evening News, in 1995, and I've been here off and on 13 years. I've also worked some other local papers in the area too.
13 years, so wow.
It's my third time around. Third time's the charm, right?
That's really interesting. So Mike, what is your role? What's your title and what's your professional role here?
Well, the title is managing editor, which means that I'm supposed to be directing the editorial effort for our 6 weeklies and 2 monthlies. I have 2 really talented assistant managing editors, Peyton North and Chris Mazza, who have divided up the weeklies. So they're sort of like, they're the first line of editorial supervision for our writing staff. I still write, though. I do not want to be, I can't be Perry White. I can't sit behind a desk and shout things at people. So I get out there and I do assignments. Right now, because we've again expanded, we've created a Holyoke edition, which means we took our Holyoke news out of our Chicopee Herald. So the Chicopee Herald just covers Chicopee and Springfield. So I've got a very talented young reporter doing the Chicopee stuff. Carolyn Noel is her name. And I'm doing Springfield. But I reserve the right to meddle in what people are doing. So yeah, I still write. I write a column every week. I do a movie review every week, and I do feature writing and beat writing in Springfield. So I still do a lot of writing. Because I really think that part of the success that we've had is that I call us ground level journalism. So we're the paper, or the papers, I should say, that are not only going to cover what's happening in City Hall, but it's going to cover what's in the neighborhoods. We really get down to the level of, if your kid is in school or if you're paying property taxes and you want to know what's happening, we're doing that kind of journalism, which is extremely necessary these days. So I just try to direct the effort, doing what I do, and then contribute to the effort by actually writing.
Where would people find your articles? Which publications will your articles show up in?
They're in all of the
column?
weeklies.
Okay.
They're in all the weeklies. So, for instance, this week I did the front page article, which is an interview I did on Focus Springfield with Congressman Neal.
Oh, yes, right.
We have a particular interesting
Is that this one?
news generator. Yep, that's
There it
one of
is.
the ones. Congressman Neal is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, is one of the most powerful men in Congress.
Right.
Thankfully, we have a good enough relationship with him, both the Reminder and Focus Springfield, that he's elected to come in and talk to us on a regular basis. So he turns down Face the Nation, but he says yes to us, which is fine. But so yeah, I also do that kind of work. I do some work for Focus Springfield and represent the newspaper and other media outlets as well. But I got to keep writing. That's what it's all about.
You mentioned movie reviews. Are there any movies to review right now?
Well, yes, sir. The one that's going to be running in this week is one that's playing at Cinemark. Cinemark is open in West Springfield, for instance, and there is some new product getting released. And basically, I would like people to reconsider going back to theaters if they feel comfortable.
This is another topic, so I don't want to go very deep in it, but the movie theater is open.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that. I figured they were still shut down.
Well, Regal, which has a theater complex at MGM Springfield, is shut down around the world. That entire company is shut down.
Right.
Cinemark has made the decision to reopen.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, that's actually another great topic, but for another time. And Hope, what is your title and role here?
I'm editor of the Westfield News, and my role is to get our daily paper out every day.
We are a proud subscriber, I might add. I look forward to it every day.
We are, although I say every day means Monday through Saturday. We do not publish a paper on Sunday. And I like Mike, I'm a writer. I'm always going to be a writer, so rarely does a day go by that I'm not writing something for the paper. So I cover a lot of Southwick. Amy Porter and Peter Currier tackle a lot of our municipal Westfield stories, which are still really important to cover. A lot of these little, subcommittee meetings that nobody pays attention to is where a lot of the work gets done. And so I'm proud of the fact that we're still putting out those kinds of stories. And we also have the human interest side. And it's great. We really have a good mix of our business, our municipal, our families, our COVID. There's something COVID almost every day on our front page. And I help coordinate that and write and just keep our daily operations going here.
I'm always interested. I read the newspaper. My wife and I, we get the Springfield paper and Westfield paper. We have for almost 30 years, as long as we've lived here. And the Westfield paper, obviously, I'm always looking closely at because I'm interested in knowing what our hometown news is. But when I read the stories, I always think about this sometimes. Are there certain stories? I'm guessing there must be certain stories that are easy to write, and other stories that are difficult to write, or not as fun. But are there certain topics that are really challenging to cover? And you're sitting in a meeting or a news, a press release, news conference. That's the word I was looking for. And you're grabbing bits of information, and then you've got to meld it all together to make it sound interesting, and make sure that it is transparent and something that people want to read. What's the challenge in that? And do you find there's certain topics that you really struggle with writing about, or is it really not an issue?
Mike's laughing. Take it away, Mike.
Well, okay, so there are things that happen, especially on the municipal government side of things, that are very important, but are sometimes very difficult to explain. So, when you have to write about the property tax raising, and whether or not a community is at the tax levy, are they at the levy limit? Suddenly there's all this jargon that's being thrown at you, and it's your job as a reporter to actually, ask all of those questions an average person would ask in order to fully understand what is happening. And yes, certain things like taxes, it's not a sexy topic, but it is a topic that everybody wants to know about. Another thing that's very challenging is school departments tend to use an incredible amount of jargon these days. And especially now with COVID-19, there's even more jargon that's tossed about. So again, it's your responsibility as a reporter to figure out all of this and try to put it together in such a way that the average person is going to understand it. And I consider reporters to be average people. So even if we have a lot of context for a particular story, we have to understand who our audience is. The worst thing that happens to me at press conferences is that if you have any municipal event, then you're going to have everybody there to talk about it. And I was at one event yesterday, and a fellow reporter and I looked at each other and sighed when the fifth or sixth person came up to the microphone, and it's 26 degrees outside, and that's challenging. But in essence, we're frequently thrown into the deep end of the pool when it comes to understanding particular things, and it's our job to understand it so our readers can understand it, and it can be challenging if you lack context.
So you've really got to research it yourself to understand the terminology and just what they're talking about.
And I think what can happen too, if you've been a reporter for a long time, you've covered a lot of these meetings, you tend to understand the jargon eventually. Mm-hmm. So it's breaking it down so the average reader who maybe doesn't have that background. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is it's ingrained in your head, like, oh, I know what ASR blah 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 means, but then you have to break it down for the readers who don't know what it means. And I think sometimes when you've done it for a long time, you tend to forget that part. Like, you're like, oh, I know what that means. But then you have the opposite where you're like, I have no idea what that means. My favorite comic strip is, it says how a reporter starts their day. And it's a person blindfolded with a dart in his hand. And on the dartboard, it says, today I'm an expert in, and it says like religion, politics, healthcare, taxes, whatever, and it goes around. And that's true. You have to get up to speed and quickly, maybe you're not really the expert, but you're giving out that information. It has to be correct. So you have to understand it first. So
I'm guessing that the two of you have been in this business a long time. There's probably very few topics I could throw at you that you couldn't talk about to some degree or level.
Is this going to be a test?
We're not doing like a family
No, I'm not going to do it. But I'm guessing that you really, you've been around long enough that you've probably delved into almost any topic.
Well, here's how part of how journalism has changed. Especially with daily papers, reporters used to have beats, and there used to be a police reporter, a court reporter.
So you specialized.
So yeah, so you're the police person. That means that you are talking to the chief's office every day. You're going to follow up on any story that would come your way as a police reporter. Same thing as courts. You go in the courts, you know that beat. The issue is now with the changes in media that a reporter is less likely to find him or herself on a beat. Rather, their beat may be a community, and what that means, there's all sorts of stuff happening in that community, and that they will be asked to cover different things. So there's been a tremendous amount of changes. What does benefit our papers is the fact that we have a lot of people who've been around a while. We have a lot of people with good context. And that context is extremely valuable because the only way you can achieve it is by being a veteran, being in an area long enough to understand certain things. It's also very helpful if you have someone like me on the staff. I'm 66 years old, so I'm older than dirt, according to my staff, which has a high level of millennials, that I can actually give them context about things so they can better understand what has happened in the community, how a community has evolved. So, Hope and her staff, they have some rough beats, but yet they're asked to do all sorts of things, cross beat, so to speak. And certainly the staff that I supervise, their beats are by community. And so that means that there's an awful broad group of topics that they are asked to cover at any one time. So things have changed in this industry, and it's changed as daily papers have shrunk. It's changed as people's habits have been altered by social media. So there's been a lot of change.
What do you feel is the importance of still having a local downtown newspaper? I'm guessing that there aren't many community daily newspapers anymore. Are there any other than the Westfield News in the Valley that are dailies?
Well, of course, the Republican and the Gazette.
Well, the Republican,
the Gazette, right, is still.
But I look at the Republican as being a regional newspaper,
right.
but a hometown daily newspaper.
I mean, we've got the Berkshire Eagle also.
Is that daily?
It is a daily. Yeah.
Okay.
The Gazette Northampton,
Yeah.
and the Greenfield Recorder.
Okay.
But as far as right here in our little spot, it's just us.
I always felt that Westfield was pretty unique in having our own newspaper. I always thought that was I thought it was a pretty cool thing. Yeah. Now, were there more daily newspapers in communities prior to this? I mean, did almost every community have their own dailies? Or?
Well, Holyoke, for instance, had the Transcript Telegram. They had the Transcript Telegram, over a century. So Holyoke had a paper, Westfield had a paper. There were two papers in Springfield. There was the Morning Union and the Daily News. So you had a morning paper and an evening paper coming out of Springfield.
Is that right?
Yes, separate staffs, competing separate staffs, owned by the same company in the same building. But they competed for stories against one another.
Wow.
You go up north, the Gazette was a powerhouse. The Greenfield Recorder in Franklin County was a powerhouse. So much has changed, and it's largely because of the advertising base changing. And with the advertising base changing and with greater competition from social media, things have changed for many newspapers.
So I wanted to go there. So how has social media really changed print media? How has that changed your world? And is that a continuing challenge? And do you think that social media will ever be the demise of print media like this?
Well, I
or
hope.
will there always be a place
I
for
sure
this?
hope not. I'm hoping to retire in this business one of these days.
I'm with you.
I've still got close to 20 years of work life
Fran
ahead of
hasn't
me.
extracted a promise from you like he has from
Oh
me?
no! I'm still in my 40s, but I'm getting there. Maybe in a couple of years he'll work on that. But I'm hopeful. I mean, I grew up getting 3 papers delivered to my house every day. So as a kid, I read. We had the Westfield News, we had the Springfield Union, and we had the New York Daily News because we're a New York family. And so I grew up with that, and I don't think kids are growing up with that as much. That's one of the reasons that I partnered with the Westfield Education to Business Alliance last year and did a year-long project with second graders, because we really wanted to instill in them the importance of newspapers at a young age. And we would send the kids, bring a paper home to your parents and try to get them reading the paper, because as much as social media, live streaming, TV, you can get something out there quickly, it's not always the right story. It's not always correct. It might not always have the details. So we're trying to, I was trying to teach these young families, like, there's still value in this newspaper. And we still have a healthy circulation every day in the Westfield News for a small town daily. I think we're doing okay. And I am hopeful that a lot of things that were old is new again with these millennials, as Mike knows, because he's surrounded by them. Me, not so much. We're not really too much with the millennial staff. But I think a lot of the millennial age people I've seen are appreciating some of the so-called vintage things, including newspapers. And so I am hopeful that we have a generation right now that does see that value also, and that it transcends social media, because social media does take away some of the thunder of a paper in a lot of ways, because people can put something out there and folks, whether they believe it or not to be true, put it out there, and other folks read it and believe it to be true, and then it's our job to say, hey, that is true or that isn't true, and here's why, and back that up. So I think that we have a bit of a partnership in a way with social media.
I tend to always read the papers at night when I'm having dinner, just before dinner, because during the day I'm running around even though the papers come. My wife will have read it, but that's usually when I sit down. And I have a lot of friends who don't physically get the paper anymore. They read it on their computer screens or their iPad screens. And I said, how do you do that? To me, there's nothing more gratifying. And I just look forward to the opportunity to take the paper and physically open it. I'm scanning for articles. I'll read an article. Then I'll keep on going. Then I'm thinking, I want to look at that a little closer. I'll go back to it. But there's just something about that physical experience of opening a piece of paper and looking and seeing what's there that catches my eye versus a computer screen where I got to flip through and then, I got to go through the process of opening the computer or my iPad and then go online, try to find the paper or the news that I'm interested in. But I just physically find that I enjoy that experience of holding a piece of paper. Unfortunately, the millennial population and younger, they tend to be very data-driven, in a visual standpoint. So it's got to be the challenge for you of how do you bring that generation into physically receiving a piece of paper to read.
Well, they do. Folks that I know enjoy reading real books versus Kindle books or e-books, and so we're just trying to transition to real papers. Perhaps the smell of the ink has gotten to my brain, but I still enjoy that too. I enjoy the rustling of a paper and touching it. And my husband makes fun of me because I like to write out my grocery list or Christmas list or whatever. He's like, just do that on the computer. I'm like, no, I like the paper. I like to write it down and touch it and cross things off my list.
That's right. Shove that piece of paper in my pocket when I go to the grocery store.
We do have our online. We have thereminder.com and the westfieldnews.com. So we do have stories online for folks to read who want to get their news that way. So we're trying to reach everybody.
What do you focus on with the Westfield News? What kind of stories do you focus on?
We cover Westfield and Southwick. We don't dabble so much in the hill towns as we used to because our Penny Saver now really has a strong focus on our hill town neighbors. So we really try to cover a little bit of everything in those communities. We get our municipal coverage. We do the human interest stories. sometimes it amazes me how many people are looking at our police logs and our obituaries and things like that. People are still looking to us for that kind of like, what's going on what's my neighbor doing? We get a lot of good response to stories about children in schools and school projects.
Yeah, human
and,
interest, right.
And people love to read about businesses, especially when a new business opens. We get a lot of hits on our website and people commenting on it. I do write a column weekly where it's something personal. So because I want folks to know this is their paper, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and my family, and I want to know about you and yours. But I kind of tie it back into something going on in our community or in our world and how it affects us here. So we try to really get a little bit of everything. But it's always local. It's always going to be Westfield. It's always going to be Southwick. And if there's something that maybe is a little more regional, it's because it's extra important to folks who live here.
I notice in the paper, in the Westfield News, you do a lot with photography. That you do a lot of big spreads.
Yeah, people love our photo pages, and we've always done them, and we always get a great response. And I see them on people's refrigerators or hanging up. Like if you go to any of our schools in Westfield, there's usually a bulletin board outside the office, and there's always, the Westfield News or the Penny Saver is, tacked up there with our photo pages. Sometimes they'll even circle the kids that go to that school. So. And I have been at people's houses and seen, us on their refrigerator. So we still have that audience, and we still want to. I actually saw it at the American Inn. I was at the American Inn in Southwick recently, and they had one of our photo pages up because residents' grandkids were in it.
I have to believe that it's a great way to sell papers. That you put a lot of children's faces in the paper, and you got grandmothers and grandparents and aunts and uncles and family members all buying the paper.
Kids and dogs, right?
And dogs, right? Oh, that's funny. Just thinking about this, do stories find you, or do you have to look for the story?
Both.
Elaborate on that.
Okay, so, people will send us press releases. Just because you get a press release doesn't necessarily mean it's the story. The story may be... I'll give you an example. So this morning before I came to this taping, I went to the grand opening of the first recreational cannabis shop in Springfield. Okay, so they sent me a press release, and I got there and I did the interview with their VP of retail operations. But that's not the story. The story is no one turned up. So every time a cannabis shop has been opening, usually the first day there's quite a crowd.
Yeah.
There was 3 reporters and a police officer they hired for extra duty, and no one else. So the story that I'm going to be writing is a national company, and this is a company that's got stores in about 5 or 6 states, came to Springfield, and nobody knew about it. So I'm going to couple that with a press release about another Northampton store opening, and the whole idea of the story that will come out of this is sort of have we reached the next level in terms of cannabis sales?
Saturation.
And that is, now it's just like you open a liquor store on the corner. We know what the liquor store sells, and maybe we'll go there, but maybe we'll go someplace else because they have better products or service or prices. So to me, that's an example of, instead of just it's a grand opening story, now it could be something else. It could be a trend story about a business sector, a growing business sector. So people, a lot of people have got my cell phone number, and I get messages and I get tips. I get people asking me to do things. We get press releases. Reporters sit and pore through agendas. My rule to any of my reporters is never go to a public meeting unless you've read the agenda. Because otherwise you may be wasting your time. Or otherwise there may be something on that agenda that you weren't really aware of, and now that's the story. So, stories come from all different places in all different ways, and you just have to be open to evaluating them if they really are a story and if they're a story for your publication. I mean, I get tons of press releases from people thinking that the Springfield area is a suburb of Boston. You know, I've had people say to me, "Don't you want to cover this? It's in Boston." It's like, no. Do you have access to the internet? Please take a look at where Springfield is as compared to Boston.
Right.
You know, you get people are constantly pitching you stories in one way or another. That's you know, just the flow and ebb of things.
So I'm guessing as I listen to this, you can't take every story idea or write about everything. One, you don't have room for it. You don't have the staff time for it. So how do you evaluate what's the best story to go after?
Well, we go for local first. Obviously, for us, it's Westfield, Southwick. And then what's going to have the most impact? What's going to affect our community members the most? And how is it going to impact them? And who are they? And not just cover this story at this meeting, but let's talk to some residents that are going to be affected by this and get down to their level and get into their home and how is this going to affect your household. So those are the priorities for me.
Do you feel there's a difference in how you approach news? And I'm going to talk Westfield now. Let's keep it kind of local. But how has the news business changed for you in the 13 years you've been here? Is it the same, or has it really changed a lot?
It's a little of both. There's some things have changed, and some things will always stay the same when you are, you know, like we said, on the ground reporting. You're always going to get those stories. You're always going to go to those meetings. That's where those things that affect households take place. Things that happen at churches, schools, you know, all that kind of stuff is what gets into people. That's people's households. You're affecting what their lives are and their quality of life. But definitely social media and the internet have changed how you cover things because, like I said, someone could be watching a live stream of a meeting while I'm sitting there taking notes. So my story might come out the next day and someone's already heard what people have to say. So you have to go through, as we talked about before, I talked about being that expert in a way, like sift through, like you could be at a 3-hour meeting and you need to pull out what's the most important thing, how is this going to affect people, what's the priority for our readers, that what should they know that happened in this meeting, because they're not going to sit there and watch 3 hours of a meeting for the most part. So what did they miss? You know, and that's where we come in. Here's what you might have missed when you tuned out of that live stream meeting. Or here's what the school committee vice chair said after the meeting to us. You know, and sometimes it's getting that summary or that extra quote that makes the story what's different and what's valuable about getting the Westfield News or one of the reminder papers.
Mike, you've been around a long time, and you've been in this business a long time. You talk about your reporters being a much younger group than yourself. How do you mentor them, and how do you train or teach them to ensure that the news they're reporting is really fairly positioned, it's not slanted to one side or the other? I'm guessing this whole concept of fake news that's out there. How do you ensure that the readers feel comfortable knowing that whatever they're reading in your publications is fair, that it's not pushing one agenda or the other, but it's fair reporting the facts?
Well, I've been very lucky that, with the exception of one or two people on the staff for the past 21 years, I've been privileged to work with a lot of really talented young writers. And they understand the concepts that stories are told from multiple viewpoints in many instances. So maybe I've just been very lucky about that. What I've tried to impress upon them is the fact that the phrase I used before, ground level, I don't have a secretary. I don't have a buffer. People call me directly. They call the reporters directly. If they think that they have been wronged by a story, or if they think that the story is slanted, they are certainly not afraid to talk to us, which I think basically is a good thing, and it says something about the relationship between our readers and us. Certainly, they may not be willing to take on larger publications, but they don't feel ownership of those larger publications. So I think that all of my staff over the years has understood that, you know, we are part of these communities, and so people are looking toward us to doing our jobs. You know, and essentially too on our level, which is talking about municipalities, talking about even regions and sometimes the state. I have to say that the term fake news hasn't been tossed our way. That's on the national level, and that's a different phenomenon. Now, because I write an opinion column, people do disagree with me more than once. And as long as they want to write me a letter to the editor, and as long as the letter is within 500 words and isn't libelous, I print it. I don't care what they say about me, because again, my job is to print that stuff. Even if they're damning. I mean, you know, our former publishers, one of them had a friend who insisted that I was a communist, which was an interesting allegation. You know, and he felt very open about going to my boss and saying he's a communist. People feel ownership of these newspapers. They feel like they can approach us if there's something that they perceive as wrong. You know, and frankly, if we've made a mistake, we own up to it and we fix it as very best as we can do.
Which publication does your opinion column show up in?
In all the weeklies, the Penny Saver, the Reminders, the Chicopee Herald. So yeah, yes, the Westfield News is safe, from my opinion.
You can feel free to send it.
Now, can you? I'm curious about this, because I always read the opinion pages. I always look, like in the Republican, I look at the back page. I look at, you write stuff. I'm always interested in hearing what reporters have to say. Are there any topics that you're not allowed, or do you have complete freedom to write about whatever you want?
I have complete freedom as long as I understand what motivates my paycheck. All right, so you know, you got to be responsible.
Right.
Okay, so you have to be responsible. The problem with a lot of social media stuff now is the people who participate in it don't understand responsibility. They don't understand that when they write something or say something about someone or a business or an institution, that this thing is, with social media, it's damn near permanent. I mean, it's out there almost forever someplace that someone can find it. So I'm very cognizant of writing about things in such a way that, well, I can make my point, but I'm not going to do it in a way that's going to elicit legal action. I'm not going to do something that's going to elicit maybe an advertiser dropping out, because I've done that before. I've gone through that, and especially, well, I did talk radio for a number of years, and in this market, and you know, sometimes an advertiser doesn't like what you've said on the air, so they pull ads, and then you get the general manager standing in front of your desk hollering at you. So and that was many years ago. So I've learned how to be responsible, and I think anyone who writes a column owes it to themselves, and owes it to their employer, and also owes it to the reader to be responsible in what you write.
Do you actually look at every story that is written by your reporters, or you just go on trust that whatever they're writing is? With 6 editions,
I mean, right now our papers are reaching 211,000 readers.
Wow.
These 6 weeklies. We're on target to maybe do 2 more expansions next year. So unfortunately, no, I can't read everything.
So you go on trust that whatever they're putting out is...
Yeah, well, I go on the trust that my assistant managing editors are reading the stuff for their editions.
Okay, so there's another layer that is checking what's going in.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no. The idea that no reporter wants a situation where he or she is simply writing something that gets into a paper without it being checked by at
Okay,
least
that's
someone else.
where I was going. So there is a vetting.
Oh, we have
process.
It starts when we have a weekly news meeting and we talk about what we're working on, and there's questions asked there, and then the stuff that's written goes through an assistant managing editor, and then before it gets published, it goes through a whole editing process that we've got. And as much as I would like to read everything that everybody does, I really can't. Very few people with my title, by the way, are in a position of reading everything that everyone does at a paper now. So,
But bottom line is, reporters, I guess it's a fail-safe system you've got in place to ensure that whatever's being written, the
Someone
paper is
read it.
taking a look at it first before it's getting published, and they're kind of putting their blessing on it. Do you look at, you're now in a weekly, or daily rather?
I do read everything daily, even sports. Which, so we have, we publish 6 times a week, but we are doing it every single day and with a smaller staff. So I am able to look at our bylines every day. And like I said, I look at sports, and our sports editors are our only other editor on the staff, so he'll look at my stories for me. And that's something we're proud of too. I didn't mention before, our sports coverage is, we still cover
Yeah, you
our
do a
daily
good job
local
with great
sports
local
too. I want to give a
coverage.
shout out to Chris Potts, our sports editor,
Right.
who's doing a great job, and he's our backup editor. And right now there's not a ton of sports happening, unfortunately, so he's going to be doing some news writing. So,
Have you ever had to pull a story?
I have, if something's not quite right and you're up against a deadline and you're trying to get the answer because you want it to be right, sometimes you just have to pull a story. And we are, in the past we've had AP. Right now we use our State House News Service, so we have options. If we have to take something, we have something that we can put in its place, but we want to find out that it's correct. If we find out something's not right, it's not going to go in. And we're lucky in the daily world that, okay, hold it till tomorrow. Let's get it right tomorrow.
How many staff work for you with the Westfield News?
With our reporting staff, Chris Potts is our sports editor. Amy Porter's a full-time news writer. And that's it for our full-time staff. We also have Peter Courier is a freelancer. And Lori Zapelic is a freelance writer. Isabel Marcaselli does some freelancing. And we have a staff photographer, Mark St. Ange.
Oh yeah, sure. I see him all over the place. I'm curious, when a reporter goes to and writes a story, how much time do they generally have now to physically write the story and submit it? Are they getting, as soon as they're done, are they going home and now they're cranking it right out? Or
It depends. Most of the time, if it's a municipal news story, they are expected to get that done as quick as possible. If it's something that is taking more time, a little more research, they have more time to do that. Lori Zapelic's been doing some great series for us. She just did a fabulous one on churches and how they're surviving COVID. So that's been like a 1 or 2 story a week thing that was spread out over a month. She's working on one now with a local writers group. So it just depends on the story for us. But we want to get that news out as soon as possible. And a lot of times we will get it out on our website before it's in print. So you might see a story online on a Monday night, but you don't see it in the paper till Wednesday because of our print schedule. But we want to get it out there. We want the news out there. And then having that ability to get it out online right away means we can also update it.
Mike, you oversee the whole Reminder publishing arena. How many staff work for you? And we've got a lot of publications. Can you just kind of walk through what it is that you produce?
Okay, staff. I'm going to have to count on my fingers here. I think we're up to about 8 or 9 staff at this point, and that doesn't count George Scavera and Dave Hosmer, who do our sports photography for us. Amy does some double duty for the Penny Saver. She writes about the hill towns for the Penny Saver. We've got one freelance writer that we've been using right now. So I mean, it's if you get everybody whose work appears in our newspapers into the same room, it's probably 12, 13 people, something like that. So we have 6 weeklies. The company started, Reminder Publishing started with the Buendo family in East Long Meadow in 1962. They started doing a shopper called the Reminder, and from that it morphed into a small newspaper group. They bought the Chicopee Herald in 1999. They bought a couple other publications. Let's see, how many years ago is it? Over 2 years ago, the Buendos sold us to Advance through the Republican. So I thought my career was over. Amazingly enough, they wanted to keep me because we have been competing against the Republican for both stories and ads for a very long time. And our general manager, Fran Smith, who has come up with a format, and the format is working. It's community news and community advertising that is home delivered. And advertisers like it because this way they can get inserts into the hands of people affordably. Local advertisers like it because we charge less for our advertising. Again, it's getting into the hands of people. So with our 6 publications, the only community within those 6 publications that does not have some element of home delivery, if not completely home delivered, is Springfield. So we home deliver to Chicopee, which is 55,000 people. We home deliver the Penny Saver to Westfield and Southwick, and then mail it to hill towns. The East Long Meadow paper, the flagship paper, goes to East Long Meadow, Hamden, and Wilbraham. So Agawam and West Springfield, that edition, self-explanatory, that's the communities they go to. We just added East Hampton this year, and so it's being home delivered to East Hampton. And then it gets into Southampton and West Hampton as well. So right now, in our circulation area, which is most of Hampden County and a cut into Hampshire County, we're home delivered. It's an unusual model, but it is working. Advertisers like it, readers like it. They're getting, we just launched our Holyoke edition a few weeks ago. The response has been really, really positive from people because they say Holyoke has a newspaper again. So that's very positive to hear. So in essence, what we're doing is, and I don't want to sound egotistical about this, but I think we are the only newspaper group in America that has added editions during COVID.
Yeah, that's Hope was mentioning that to me earlier, and I found that really interesting.
And again, a lot of this is because of the model that Fran came up with, and it seems knock wood, it seems to be working, and we do have more expansion plans for the next 2 years, basically.
Wow.
So.
That's really exciting to hear, quite frankly, because when you do hear about the impact that social media has had and the internet has had on print media, it's really been huge. But it's great to hear that you found a foothold and you're really able to leverage that, and you're really doing well with it.
Well, part of the story always is like us versus social media, and really that's part of the story, but it's not the entire story. A lot of the story about the way things have changed has to do with the fact that papers like the Westfield News, papers like the Reminder, have always had an advertising base that is local. The very worst thing that has happened to newspapers is the proliferation of national chains that do not want anything to do with local newspapers. Mm-hmm. And local chains then obliterating locally owned business in the same merchandising sector. Mm-hmm. In our case, part of our success is that regional and some national chains see us as the way to get their inserts to us, to the readers, which is great. But in many areas, once you get certain national chains into your community, they tend to erode that advertising base. When the advertising base erodes, then that's when you start laying off people, you start making your paper smaller, you start maybe eliminating the things that people have been buying the paper for. What's the name of the place? I'm having a blank here. There's a national restaurant that moved into Boston Road in Springfield. Golden Corral.
Oh yeah.
Golden Corral. The PR person called me up and said, "Well, you want to come out and do a story? The mayor's going to be there." I said, "No." Why don't you want to cover our opening? I said, "Will you ever advertise in our newspapers?" Probably not, sir. I said, "Well, I have local restaurants that advertise in our newspapers. Your business is designed to put local advertisers, local restaurants out of business. Why should I support you?" Well, I don't know. Well, maybe next time you should have an answer for someone like me, because it's not going to be the last time you hear that from someone. So, part of what makes local journalism works is the local advertising. It's just not, the money that you get off of the price of a newspaper is icing. It's, people think, oh, well, that's where you get a lot of your money. No, you get your money from advertising. And if the advertising base is eroding, then that's a real issue. So anytime you go to Amazon and you buy a book, instead of going to your local bookseller and buy a book, and then you worry about whether or not there's going to be a local newspaper, think about what you're doing. It's up to consumers to make choices to actually support local businesses, because those local businesses are then part of an infrastructure that's supporting many other things, including local journalism.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Where do you physically print everything? Where does the production actually take place?
Well, the production for the Westfield News happens right here. Our actual, putting the paper together. Same with the reminders are done in our local and our West and East offices, and they are printed in Springfield at the Republican.
And so it's got to be a pretty tight turnaround, I'm guessing, for you to get everything, and you designed the layout of what it's going to look like. So you got to write it, proof it, check it, lay it out, send it there.
Proof it again.
Proof
You got to look at it before you send it.
Then how long does it take them physically to print it? And then you got to read it. Now you talk about home delivery. You're talking. That's a huge foot. I was thinking about that when you were. That's a big footprint.
Yep, it sure is.
That
we have
is
two directors of circulation, Holly and Nate. They do an exemplary job. We appreciate deeply our carriers, who also do an exemplary job. So yeah, it's the operation. So just taking the Chicopee Herald, for instance, the Chicopee Herald is, well, I got to go lay it out when we get done with this interview, but it's usually laid out on Monday, goes to the printer on Tuesday, comes back by Wednesday, so then it can be distributed over Wednesday and Thursday.
Wow.
So Wednesday afternoons, we're done with all the reminders, so we start the process again. We have a news meeting, we figure out where we're going, and then we start Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, because Friday is the first of our layout days for 3 of our newspapers.
Wow.
So yes, it's easy to confuse your weeks.
And for us, we do it every day.
I was going to say, yeah, you're doing that every day.
We do that every day. So we're, like I said, they're publishing 6 different newspapers in a week, and we publish 6 editions in a week. So it's just this, just spread out differently. So we do it every single day. Our schedule is we're printed the day before it hits the streets. We are, as you know, delivered home delivery with the Republican. So you get your more regional and national news for the most part there, and you get your more local with us all in one pretty package. So that it's the same process that goes every single day. We get our stories, I read them. We have our production manager extraordinaire, James Johnson Corwin, who puts it all together. I look at it again, and then it's sent off. They print it, and then we start it again. Usually, I usually work in more than one paper, one day at once, anyway, because you've just got to keep it flowing. So same way, you get it done and you start it all over again.
Wow, it's amazing. So there's never any downtime. I mean, there's a lot of pressure you've got to get the stories, and you got to produce it, you got to get it printed and distributed, and you just start that process all over again. So
I will say one thing: when Reminder Publishing purchased our paper last year, it's been since July of 2019. One of the first things Mike said to me was, "Why are you working 11, 12 hours a day? You got to find some time. Don't work all weekend. Take some time. You're going to run yourself to the ground." And I heeded his advice, and I do carve out some time. Sometimes it's in the middle of the day. I get I hit that deadline in the morning and I'm done. And then, I might take a couple hours and decompress, and then I start at night because I might have a meeting to cover, and then I tend to write my story right after the meeting, whether I need to or not, because it's fresh in my mind.
Right.
And then I'll reread it in the morning and see, okay, what did I miss in my grogginess last night? But Mike instilled in me, you have to take some time for yourself.
He's a good boss.
So I appreciate that advice.
Yes, you have to. With this business now, and especially now, at 2020, the dumpster fire year of this century, my reporters, my staff has got a Facebook Messenger chat thing, and they start chatting before my alarm goes off. And sometimes they stay chatting until I turn my light off at night. And of course, they're not just talking about work. This is part of a social. It's a social gathering between the staff members. But the bottom line is that this is a job that's very easily creeps into all parts of your life. So you start to see things that you do or things that you experience as potential content, which you do have to, and people will approach you everywhere. I like smoking cigars, and I like drinking brown liquor. So I go to my favorite place, which is Smokey Joe's Cigar Lounge in downtown Springfield. So I'm sitting at Smokey Joe's, having an adult beverage and smoking a cigar. People will pitch me stories. People will come up and say, "Gee,"
right.
So
you're never off the clock.
You're never really off the clock. People will say, "Geez, I got a great story. I got a great idea. Do you want to hear it?" And of course, you always have to say yes. You don't want to shoot someone down. That's not good for you or the paper. But the bottom line is that once people understand who you are and what you do, there's a very good chance that they're going to pitch you something, which again is fine, but it says something to the nature of this job, and that you're always sort of on.
I drag my kids to a lot of things too. Because a lot of things happen on the weekend, and you want to cover it, or sometimes it's a quick picture and you're there for 10 minutes. So my kids have become known around town too, like, oh, those are the Tremblay kids.
The Tremblay kids, right.
So they've one time I was driving somewhere and someone called me to tell me something was on fire. I literally turned around with my kids in the car and I was like, "Don't move," and took a couple pictures of a fire, because that's just part of the job, and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly.
Yeah, and I think it should be noted with our viewers that you talk about trying to have some free time. You're here on your day off.
I am. I forgot I had taken today off, so that's fine.
So even on her day off, she's in here giving us the interview. So, I'm curious, when did you physically move to this office? Everybody knows the Westfield News iconically has been on School Street since 1669, when we were founded as a city.
The 1960s. We moved up here, 181 Root Road, in August, officially. Okay. We opened our doors in August, and it's a beautiful, modern, professional space. Although there is a cycling class sometimes that makes it a little more exciting above our heads. But, there's something about being downtown in the middle of things that's you get that idea of what's a newspaper office like. And we had that, and it was a horrible space. It was time for a change. Lots of things that we've been talking a lot about change today, and how newspapers are changing and news is changing. And this was a great change for us. And it also allows us to have more comfortable professional space to welcome more staff in, because now that we have these expanded papers and we have an East and a West office, we have more space for folks to come in. Even just, reporter covering East Hampton wants to come write something and doesn't want to go home because they have to go back out again. So they can come here, literally plug their laptop in, write their story, get it done, and then keep going on with their day. And it's nice to see folks that we don't always get to see from our other office too.
Yeah.
So it really, and we in turn can go to the East office if we want to. If for whatever reason I'm out in the East Long Meadow area and I'm like, I need to stop in and I need to get something done, I can go into that office. So it's nice to have that option.
People can come here if they want to.
Anybody on our staff can come here.
And the public as well. Is the public
of course,
welcome
yes,
here?
we are open to the public. We've always had a lot of foot traffic. That was one thing that did concern me when we were moving out of a location that we've been in for a long time. Was we had a lot of folks who would come in and pay a bill, place a classified ad, just come say hi. We had a lot of canine friends who would stop in, and people were on their walks with their dog, would stop in, grab a paper, we'd give dog treats. So we're not getting that as much here, but we welcome it. The public is welcome here. We have staff here every day. Someone's here between 8:30 and 4:30 for sure. Sometimes later. We tend to be creatures of the night around here, so we would love to have the public come in, and we can give you a quick tour and see our space too.
I just want to remind our viewers, we are at the Root Athletic Facility on Root Road. Many of you will know this is the big athletic, the big gray building that's next to the outdoor soccer fields. So when you see the soccer fields, you think, Westfield News is in there, but they really are.
We are. So, we have a sign out front, and we have the indoor field right behind this wall, which is exciting too sometimes. When you're sitting here, maybe you have writer's block for a minute, you look out and you see all these kids are practicing and there's activity, especially during COVID. It's so nice to see people doing things and being active right outside your window. So it's a nice atmosphere. And
can you remind everyone how they can get in touch with you? Phone number, email, website?
Sure. So we are at thewestfieldnews.com. Our office is 562-4181.
Give that one more time.
413-562-4181. My email is hope@thewestfieldnewsgroup.com. You can also find us on Facebook, and Mike can toss out his info.
Sure. Reminder Publications, our website is thereminder.com. My email address is very simple. It's news, N-E-W-S, at thereminder.com. No, I'm not going to give you my cell number.
Too many people have our
Too many people have it already.
Too many people have it already.
Right. But I know now where to find you.
But yeah, and
bring my cigar.
Especially for our Westfield and Southwick readers, Chris Mazza is the editor in charge of the Penny Saver. He operates out of both offices, but he's frequently in this office. So his email address is cmaza, M-A-Z-A, at thereminder.com. And again, if you've got story ideas that you want to see in the Penny Saver, just drop them a line. You can send them to me if you'd like, but I forward stuff to Chris, and then he makes the determination about what's going into the paper.
Yep, and people send them to me still too, and I forward info to Chris too. We work together, so I'm happy to do that.
Is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to share with our audience, or do you think we've covered it?
I'm just excited that we are still here and publishing all these really important papers for our communities, and I'm thrilled that we've had expansion and that we have more expansion coming. I don't know, Mike's probably not as thrilled because he's in charge of expansion.
No, I'm thrilled.
But we're happy to be here. I was in the Westfield Evening News as a kid. Carl Hartigan took my picture.
Oh, sure, Carl.
You know, when I was playing soccer
Another
in 7th
icon
grade,
with
when
the
I was
paper.
doing school plays in high school, and Carl still does some work for us. So it was exciting for me to come back here again for the third time, and hopefully for a long time. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank the two of you for taking time out of a busy schedule. I know you got papers to get out. I'm going to be looking forward to going home tonight and reading my edition of the Westfield News, as I always do. But
it's actually right here.
Yeah, there it is. Oh, there it is. I haven't actually even seen it. But with me today is Mike Dobbs, who is the managing editor of The Reminder, and Hope Tremblay is the editor of the Westfield News. Again, we are at the Reminder Publishing West offices, which includes the Westfield News, at the Roots Athletic Center on the lower level at 181 Root Road here in Westfield. On behalf of Kenny Stomsky, I am Harry Rock, and you've been watching another episode of Discover Westfield with Ken and Harry. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Okay. That was smooth.
It was smooth, but I got to tell you, I still look down and I say, do I have all my parts here?
I guarantee you have all of your neutrons and protons and electrons. All of your atoms are together.
I know. I don't. The last time I heard those terms was when I was in high school chemistry, I think. So what an exciting location. What an exciting show we just had.
I learned a lot.
I absolutely did. We were at, just to remind you, we were visiting with the Reminder Publishing West offices where the Westfield News is located and the Reminder. And we were meeting with Mike Dobbs, who's the managing editor of the Reminder, as well as Hope Tremblay, who's the editor of the Westfield News. And Hope is a regular on your show, I know.
I try to have her come in on the second Tuesday of every
Right.
month. Doesn't always work out, but we try to
Right.
fit her in. And I decided to bring her on to keep the relationship between community programming and the local paper alive, because prior to that, we did have Patrick Berry, who was hosting his own show.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I have to tell you, in all the doom and gloom, you worry about print advertising, and not so much advertising, but print news, because everything has become so Wi-Fi.
And you use that Wi-Fi to go on the social media and
Social
do things
media,
digitally.
Right, exactly, and onto websites. And thank you, that was helping me there. But what's interesting is to see that the Reminder Publishing offices are doing so well. They have 6 weekly newspapers. They've got a daily, which is the Westfield News that we know, and they've also got 2 magazines. And they are looking to potentially kick off another...
They're expanding.
They're expanding, which was just absolutely incredible in these tough times, especially in a really tough and competitive environment.
Yeah, you're dealing A, COVID,
Right.
and B, print media kind of slowing down, and
Right.
they're going forward.
They really are. It was exciting to go in there. You just felt the energy of all of the reporters that were in there, the energy of the staff talking about all the stories that are yet to come. And they fill such an important need. And especially, I've always felt that Westfield has been very, very fortunate to have a weekly newspaper. I thought it was, I've been in Westfield now for 29 years, and I thought it was one of the qualities that made us really unique in the fact that we had our own newspaper.
Right.
And they focus, what's really cool about this, Kenny, is they don't worry about national news or really regional news. It's local news. This is where you can find out what's going on with City Hall, with the different commissions, youth sports, schools, anything that has to do churches, any celebrations, all these things keep popping up, all the stuff that would happen locally.
Police logs?
Police logs, right.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah, I know. My wife looks at those. I
Yeah.
don't pay much attention. And if you're quite frankly, and they're really good about putting a lot of photographs in the paper, so they put especially on the last page, if it's sports, if it's dance, if it's some kind of a arts thing in downtown, the Westfield 350, whatever it might be, you will find lots of photographs in there to help you to remind you of just what was it that they were there covering.
And that office was completely professional when you walked in there.
Absolutely.
And it was brand new.
Yeah.
It was night and day compared to School Street.
Absolutely. I think it's a great transition of ownership. That when it went out before and was sold off under the prior owner to where it is now, it just made sense that they should move into new offices and kind of get a fresh start. But they're really, really doing well. And again, you can order your subscriptions online. You can go right to the office itself and go in. They've got all the hand sanitizers if you need a mask, but if they don't have a mask, there was a box of masks right there. but they are very, very COVID sensitive. So you can feel very comfortable going in there to take care of whatever business you have to.
And you don't even have to go to take care of business. If I recall, Hope said just come on in to say hi like you used to down on School Street.
That's one of the things that they missed on School Street. They had a lot of foot traffic because they were just a block off the town green. But they do get some people that come in. What they really enjoy are all the kids that come in for all the soccer games and everything else that goes on in that building. They can hear them through the walls and stuff. And I know that even for this month, just out in the lobby, the WOW Christmas tree celebration fundraiser is going on, so that's a good reason.
The
to
Tree
come.
Jubilee is
the
in fact out there.
You
Yes.
can go there and watch and look at that, buy your raffle tickets. But stop in, say hi to the reporters because they would just love to see you and hear what else is going on in Westfield.
I will note that by the time this airs, the raffle will be over.
That's true. So unfortunately, we hope that you will have supported that. But it's also a good reason to know that there's reasons to get up to 181 Root Road at the Roots Athletic Center to see the Westfield News and the Reminder offices.
It was important for you to mention that, though, because that also shows how our local paper takes part in our community.
They have always been very socially oriented that way, and if there's a way for them to support, that's a great point. They will find a way to support you. So if you have something going on, give them a call and ask if they can help you. And there's more than one way that they might be able to do it, but they're happy to be a part of the community and give back as much as they are looking for people to help support them.
And we like to help out the community, too, and give back. So if you have a Westfield business that you would like to have highlighted on one of these programs, please go to www.westfieldtv.org. That's westfieldtv.org, and click on Contact Admin. That will send a message our way.
On behalf of my partner, the editor, the producer of this great series, Kenny Stomsky, I am Harry Rock. Thanks for listening to another exciting episode of Ken and Harry and Discover Westfield.